So have you ever wondered what a nuclear missile and one of the rarest birds in North America could possibly have in common? Well, the answer is pretty wild, and it's tucked away in this declassified document from the peak of the Cold War. It tells this incredible story about risk, about responsibility, and believe it or not, some really unusual math.
All right, so let's set the scene. The year is 1983. Tensions between the US and the Soviet Union, they're basically at an all-time high. And right in the middle of all that, a team of analysts gets tasked with a super specific report. But here's the thing. It's not about troop movements or enemy silos. No, it's about something else entirely.
And this is it. This is the document at the very heart of our story. Dated October 4th, 1983, it's titled Report of Pershing II Impact on Bosque del Apache Refuge. Now, on the surface, that sounds like pretty standard, kind of dry military paperwork about a weapons test, right? But what they were actually testing for, that was something else.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. I mean, the first line of the abstract just cuts right to the chase. The report's entire point was to figure out the odds that a test launch of a Pershing II missile might accidentally kill an animal. And not just any animal, a very specific, endangered one.
So this sets up a scenario that's, well, it's almost unbelievable, isn't it? You've got the absolute pinnacle of military tech on what is, at least statistically, a collision course with this incredibly fragile piece of the natural world. So let's meet the two main characters in this strange drama.
And you can just feel the contrast here. It's so stark. In one corner, you have the Pershing II, a solid-fueled, two-stage ballistic missile. It could carry a nuclear warhead. I mean, this was a key piece of Cold War strategy. And then, in the other corner, you've got the whooping crane, one of the most endangered birds on the entire planet, a symbol of conservation, of wilderness.
And the place where these two completely different worlds were about to intersect was right here, the Bosque del Apache National Wildlife Refuge in New Mexico. It's this beautiful sanctuary for migratory birds that, well, it just happened to be right under the potential debris path for a missile test being launched from Idaho all the way to a target in New Mexico. And the stakes here? They really came down to a single number, 31. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some of the cranes. According to this very document, this was the entire population of whooping cranes wintering in that refuge, the whole shebang. So losing even one would have been a massive blow to the species. The stakes were just incredibly high.
So this brings us to the real problem facing these analysts, right? How in the world do you even begin to calculate such a specific and frankly unlikely risk? I mean, this wasn't a simple coin toss. This was a super complex problem involving physics, geography, and biology.
They started by mapping out the danger zone. And this is the impact ellipse for the missile's second stage. Based on the trajectory, they calculated this massive area where debris was most likely to fall. Just look at it. It covers a huge chunk of the landscape. We're talking over 100 kilometers long.
Okay, so next, they had to figure out how these two key shapes, the ellipse and the refuge, actually interacted. And this diagram, which is hand-drawn right from the report, shows you exactly that. You've got the missile's impact ellipse on the left, and then the kind of funky, irregular shape of the Bosque refuge on the right. And you can see that clear area where they overlap.
Now, trying to do the math for that jagged, weirdly shaped refuge would have been a total nightmare, so they did something really smart. They approximated its outline. They broke it down into 4 much simpler geometric areas and just labeled them A, B, C, and D. And just like that, the math became manageable.
And that simplification, that was really the key. It unlocked the whole problem, and it let them bring in the high-tech solution of the day, a computer simulation.
They used this really powerful technique called a Monte Carlo simulation. And what that is, essentially, is a way of solving a problem by just running the same experiment over and over and over again with random inputs, just to see what kind of outcomes you get. You can kind of think of it like throwing thousands of digital darts at a map to figure out the size of a really complex target.
So here's how their simulation actually worked. First, the computer would just generate a random landing spot, an X, Y coordinate for the debris. Then it would check, hey, did that spot land inside any of our simplified refuge areas, A, B, C, or D? And then it would just do that again, and again, and again, 20,000 times, counting up every single hit. And this is just so cool. This right here is the engine that powered the whole analysis. This is the actual basic computer code they wrote to run that simulation. It's such a beautiful piece of vintage computing history, and its whole job was to figure out which of those 20,000 random points was a hit and which was a miss.
All right, so the simulation is done. The computer has run its 20,000 iterations. What's the first big takeaway? What did all that number crunching actually tell them?
This slide here shows the raw results. Of the 20,000 simulated impacts, a grand total of 1,906 of them landed inside one of those 4 sub-areas that represented the refuge. The computer had done its job. So you do a little quick division, 1,906 divided by 20,000, and you get this. This was the first major finding. There was a 0.095, or a 9.5% chance that missile debris would land somewhere inside the boundaries of that huge 57,000-acre refuge.
But you know, a 57,000-acre refuge is a big place. Landing some debris inside a massive park is one thing. The real question, the whole reason they did this, was what's the chance of that debris actually hitting one of the 31 cranes? So the analysis had to go one step further. To get to that final answer, they had to combine their simulation data with some real-world numbers. They took that 9.5% impact probability, and then they factored in the estimated lethal area of the debris, the total acreage of the refuge, and of course, that all-important crane population of 31.
And this was the final answer, the culmination of all that mapping, all that coding, all that calculation. The probability of killing a single whooping crane during this test was 2.37 times 10 to the -6th. In other words, a little over 2 in a million. Just incredibly small.
I mean, that is an astonishingly precise answer to an astonishingly strange question, right? So what are we supposed to take away from this? From this Cold War relic, this deep dive into the infinitesimal? For me, what really stands out is the unexpected level of diligence here. This quote notes they used a conservative estimate for the lethal debris area. What that means is they purposely made the danger seem a little bigger than it probably was, just to be safe. They erred on the side of caution. Think about that. At a time of global existential threat, someone took the time to do this calculation, and to do it right.
And that leaves us with a really provocative thought, doesn't it? This bizarre report from 1983 is, in its own way, a perfect case study in how to assess these complex, low-probability, but high-consequence events. And in our modern world, as we face all kinds of new risks from technology, the climate, and everything else, it kind of makes you wonder, what does our due diligence look like today?